As always, it's a pleasure to see everyone here again. I am very excited to see all of your submissions each week, and I'm really impressed with the work that you are all sharing. I'm really excited because I have my dear friend Tehmina speaking with us today. She's a talented VFX supervisor who works at the Molecule, has a background in 3D and in matte painting, concept, lighting. Tehmina and I actually, funny story, I should say, we overlapped back in June of 2012 at the Mill, New York. She was freelancing at a lighter at this time when I was scheduling the computer graphics department. She's since worked at a number of studios, and I'm really excited for her to share her story. She and I have pretty much, I like to say this to others, but we've pretty much grown up within the industry together at around the same time, having been in the industry for about 10 years. So, and so for those of you also among our participants who are wanting to learn more about what it's like to be on set and in production, I urge you to have a think about the sorts of questions you might ask or want to ask Tehmina throughout her visit. And so without further ado, I know we've got a lot of programming ahead of us tonight, or this morning rather. So I'll let Tehmina take it away and share her story with us.
Cool. Hello, everybody. So yeah, I guess I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of backstory on how I got to where I am. Everybody's story is a little bit different, so you know, I'm not going to be able to give you guys a formula for success or anything, but I can definitely tell you what I did, and you know, maybe you guys can learn from my pitfalls and realizations. So just to start with like a little way back when, I'm sure all of you are similar in that, you know, I had a pretty creative childhood. You know, I loved drawing and just kind of, I loved music. I played piano. I loved just kind of immersing myself in art, you know, just kind of the thing. I was a little bit of an introvert. But yeah, I loved all that stuff. And when it came to, you know, getting into college and trying to figure out what I wanted to do for like a real job, you know, I had that love for the arts, but I also felt like I needed to do something that had like practical applications. So I ended up starting off in audio engineering because I was really interested in music. And I was like, okay, this is a good way to kind of like, you know, be in music, but not necessarily be a starving artist, you know, that my parents always warned me about. But I kind of quickly realized that that wasn't the most viable industry to be in, especially in Boston. And I transitioned into film school. However, I really didn't want to be like a director or producer or anything. Like I really wanted to do visual effects. I just didn't have the language for it at the time. And there weren't a whole lot of programs out there that, I mean, there might have been programs, I just didn't know it. And I didn't know how to look for it. I didn't really have the resources to be like, hey, this is what it's called. Go here. I think Full Sail at the time had something, a small program. But anyways, so I ended up sort of, you know, for my undergrad, double majoring in film and computer science, kind of to make up for the fact that I just didn't know what visual effects was. And because it was sort of, it seemed a little bit unrealistic to me at the time to try and get into film. I really wanted to be in film, I just didn't know how. And it was just, you know, having computer science skills, it was a lot easier to get a job as a programmer. So I actually went into the field of software security for a couple of years, working with a bunch of like MIT hackers. And it was really interesting. I mean, I will say that like, you know, computer science is cool and that it like really changed the way my brain worked because I was totally like a creative kid and I was afraid of math. And then going to computer science kind of like, it literally just kind of changes the way your brain works. You just analyze things differently. And you also have a little bit more confidence in being able to deal with technical issues. So that is helpful. So yeah, I fell into, you know, I worked for a software security company for a couple of years. And I really did want to move into more creative fields. So eventually what I did was I transitioned. I moved from New York, from Boston to New York to work at a design agency in the city called Code and Theory. And they're great. I mean, they do really, really cool websites and interactive stuff. You know, but of course I went there as a programmer. And there, you know, I kind of struggled a little bit because I really wanted to do more creative stuff, but I was sort of like pigeonholed into this, like, you gotta, you know, do the thing that we hired you for. Naturally, makes sense. So, but you know, I talked with them over the years and was like, you know, I really want to move into doing more creative stuff. If I could do more design work, maybe I can leverage my programming skills somehow. And the thing that made the most sense at the time was to learn Flash, you know, and just do some Flash animations, because at least that was in conjunction with a lot of the work that they did, interactive work that they did. So I was like, okay, fine, you know, I'll go take a Flash class at SVA. And so, you know, I signed up for a Flash class, even though I could have taught myself. And I just, for the hell of it, I just went and I like clicked on the grad programs tab, and it's like, there's computer animation and visual effects and all this cool stuff that I really wanted to do when I was a kid. And I was just like, damn it, why didn't I do this earlier? So basically, just for on a whim, I sort of applied to SVA, just see, you know, I really wasn't doing it terribly seriously. And I got in. I was like, well, okay. So then I, just to like make sure, you know, I went and I applied to a couple of other schools as well. And I got into all of them, and I was like, oh God, I guess this means I need to actually do this. It took me, it actually took about a year of like, you know, emotional, mental struggle of, you know, do I do this? Do I change my career at 28? You know, at the time it seemed like a lot. But now in hindsight, I'm like, oh, I was so young. Anyways, so, you know, it was a big deal for me. Eventually, you know, I struggled with it, and eventually, the day before classes started, I signed up with NYU. And the reason I ended up choosing the NYU program is because I really connected with the teachers there. The program director at the time, Patricia Hurd Green, she was just like a really supportive person. She was amazing. She saw my work, you know, just my artwork. I didn't have visual effects stuff at the time. I didn't even know what visual effects was called. I thought it was just all called animation. Like, I just didn't have, like I said, I didn't have the language for it. So she saw my drawings and my paintings and was like, oh, you know, I think you're probably going to be a really good lighter. And I was like, okay, whatever that means, sure. And so anyways, you know, I sucked it up and I took out the loans, and it was really scary. And yeah, I went to NYU, I quit my job, and you know, I did that whole 2-year program, and I didn't regret it, because at the end of the day, like I said, the NYU teachers, they were connected like I thought they were going to be. And I ended up actually meeting a creative director at one of our alumni meetups. And, you know, it was very casual. It was just sort of like, we had a big alumni thing. He spoke. He worked at a company called Scioff that I really wanted to work for. I was like, these guys are so cool. I just want to work for them. So, you know, I kind of had to work up the call to just talk to this person randomly. You know, it's always difficult networking when you don't really have any background experience. You know, you just kind of feel like, oh, you know, can you give me a job? It just feels very silly. But, you know, I did it anyways. I just went up to him and just said, hey, you know, I really love the work that you guys do at Scioff. You know, I'd love to work for you guys if you're ever offering internships, or I'd love to stay in touch. So it turns out that we did end up staying in touch. And I showed him the work that I had done in semester 1 at NYU, and I had done, you know, some nice lighting projects, just homework. And he really loved it. He said that, you know, my lighting was really, really good, okay? And that, you know, he would put my reel forward to people at Scioff. And I also had a teacher at the time, Miles Tanaka, who was also well connected with them. Like, he used to be their boss when they worked at MTV. And this is kind of where the who you know thing really comes in. And networking is a big deal in the industry. It depends on what industry you're in. I did notice that when I was in computer science, it was more about what you know. You definitely can't get a job as a programmer not knowing how to program. But you know, in the arts, you really do have to know people. So Andreas Barner is the director that Cat knows as well. And he got me an internship at Scioff and Mouse Market in the summer of 2011. And so from there, I worked on my first commercial projects. I met a ton of people. Like, I met practically everybody that I know in the industry was either there or I got my next job through there.
You bring up a really, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead. What were you gonna ask?
You do bring up a really good point, you know, especially networking in the industry. And for those of you who were with us last week, Jeff Lopez also worked at Scioff and spent a lot of his career there as well. Yeah. You know, I kind of wanted to get a sense, well, actually, Iana was asking this earlier, like, was it easier for you to get a job in computer security, or was it easier for you to get a job, a creative opportunity? Like, which was easier for you?
It was easier in a sense. Well, I mean, it depends on the type of person you are. For me, relying on like my technical skills is a little bit easier because I can always make it happen. You know, whatever, you know, if it's something that I can control, then I don't have a problem with it. So, you know, with the computer stuff, it's all about, you know, what you know and your technical skills and how well you can lay that out. Right. And so that's dependent on me. So yeah, like, you know, it was a little bit easier getting a job in computer science because it's just, you know, there's more of those jobs, but also, you know, it depends on where you're located as well. New York City has a lot more creative jobs, but I did find it easier in a sense that, like, you know, I can just kind of sit back and rely on my tech skills to get me the job. However, if you're not a technical person, it is also very intimidating. It can be scary, you know, they'll ask you in a job interview to write code to calculate something like a factorial, you know, something mathematical on the spot, and that's kind of scary. But at the same time, you know, moving to New York and being kind of embedded in the city, you know, with my teachers and my contacts and everything. And also your work has to be good. You can't just like have bad work and lots of friends. That's not going to cut it either. But yeah, I found that it's different. I wouldn't necessarily say it's easier, but it's different. And yeah, like I've had a relatively easy time since I've networked with everybody here. And I've met so many people, and, you know, I've obviously done the work as well. Like, you know, you kind of have to build a little bit of a reputation there. Right. But yeah, I think one is not necessarily easier than the other. They're just different. And it depends. It's easier for you depending on if you're a tech person or if you're an outgoing creative person.
Right. And I think, I mean, for those of us who've been able to sort of look at your LinkedIn, and obviously I've known you for many years now, I mean, you've worked in an exceptional amount of studios within the New York area. It's pretty insane from my perspective, and in the best possible way. So you've certainly learned a lot about the different cultures of each studio, et cetera. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you did sort of indicate that you might be able to perhaps share your reel as well.
Yes.
I did kind of want you to sort of be able to share it, just because I think out of all the talent that we're meeting these past few weeks, I mean, you've certainly have a wide range of roles in so many different studios. And as a VFX supervisor now at the Molecule, you know, your roles probably evolved quite a bit over the past couple of years.
Okay, so I'll play this reel. It is 5 years old, but it does have a bunch of my commercial work on it. So in a sense, it's, you know, it's probably more relevant to this conversation because we can talk about the old stuff I did, and there's some of the newer stuff as well. So let me just share my screen.
And while you pull this up, Eric was mentioning that he was quite excited to see that you've worked on shows like Quantico and Homeland, and that you've provided him with hours of entertainment through college.
Ah, nice, nice. All right, Kat, can you see my screen?
I can see your screen.
Great.
Looking good.
So much of this work, these first couple of shots, are matte paintings. We can talk a little bit more about that.
Right.
This is a commercial spot I did for HBO 7 years ago.
One of the spots.
Yeah. This was with MPC. This was my third job. This was the first TV show I worked on. Blacklist, yep. This is another matte painting, CG work for Making of the Mob. I think this might have been my first matte painting. Hey, and here comes my commercial work.
Well, this is wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
No problem. Can you guys see me again?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool.
What was your favorite project on this particular reel?
Ooh. Let me think. You know what? I'm gonna go with the Making of the Mob stuff, which is the opening matte paintings. The opening shots, because that was the first show. That was actually the first show that I ever went on set for anything for. So that was super cool. And then I actually worked with a teacher on this job. One of my NYU teachers, he was actually the VFX supervisor on this show. And he actually knew that I wanted to become a VFX supervisor. So he's the person who brought me on. He brought me on set. And then he also, I don't know, I guess he just knew my skill set. And he was like, well, why don't you try doing these set extensions and matte paintings? I know you can do CG. I hadn't really done any matte paintings before, or like huge environment work that wasn't, you know, straight cartoony commercial stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So this was really fun because I got to see the set. I got to be there for the shoot. I got to even do, like, you know, second unit green screen stuff. And then I got to get back to the office and actually take these shots and build the world. And that's when I fell in love with the whole, like, first of all, I fell in love with going on set, because that's just, I don't know, it's just, you're in the world of make believe. And then also just being able to come back and build that world, like, it's pretty awesome. That's my favorite thing to do. And this was the job that introduced me to it.
That's awesome. Sarah in our audience is wondering, is it also your job as a VFX supervisor to consider budgets when you're working on projects?
Absolutely. That's like 50% of it. I mean, that's a lot of the job. I would say it's 50% of the job. Much of the time what I'm doing is I'm balancing what the showrunner, who's the writer, and the director wants, and the DP. You know, I'm kind of balancing what they want with what they can afford. So much of the time it's sort of like, yes, we can do, you know, this huge set extension. We can do a CG dragon if you really want to, but, you know, there's some alternatives. You know, maybe we could do it this way, we could shoot it differently, or, you know, have a different character. A lot of the times what ends up happening is I sit down with them. Depends on who I'm talking to. If it's in prep, I'll sit down with the showrunner and we'll go over some creative options, just you know, I'll put together some mood boards and we'll talk about like what the design of this creature could be and what's going to be easier for VFX. And it depends on how close I am with them. But yeah, a lot of the times I'm balancing the methodology with the budget.
Right. You know, we're obviously living in times of several pandemics, and you know, we're obviously working remotely at this time. So I think some of our audience members, including Anise, were kind of wondering who's the guy in the back.
Oh, that's my boyfriend. I also met him at Scioff, by the way. And he is also a VFX artist, and he's working for Charlotte's right now.
Yes,
doing a toothbrush commercial.
Tehmina's boyfriend is also a very talented artist himself. So
yeah, he's amazing. He's a really great CG artist, like CG supervisor, VFX supervisor. That's good.
Mm-hmm. So I guess, you know, in terms of in terms of softwares and programs, you know, what do you, Gabrielle was wondering what sort of programs you use when working in VFX, and you know, also in addition to that, what are some other programming languages that you've worked with while you were in computer science?
So in VFX, there's just the standard is Nuke for compositing and Maya for, you know, CG, anything, animation, rendering. Those are the two that I'm most well versed in. But we're also, just given the state of things, we are also beginning to dig into Unreal Engine, which is free. And there's lots of documentation online for it. I'm just sinking my teeth into that now, so I can't really speak to it. But I know it's important. What else? I use Photoshop a lot. I'm a matte painter, so I actually, you know, matte painting, I don't know if everybody knows what that is, but it's, you know, generally you're kind of hobbling a bunch of photos together to kind of create a backdrop for a shot, usually. But it's not always Photoshop. Sometimes it's a combination of Photoshop and CG. So I use Photoshop a lot. And I'll export that into Nuke and cut it out into layers if there's camera moves so I can get some parallax. What else? I use Substance Painter, which is a really great texturing program. I also use Mari, which is a little bit more difficult and old school to use, but it does have some capabilities that Substance doesn't have, which I can get into later if you guys want to talk about that. ZBrush is one of those things that like I want to be more into. I just never have the time. And ZBrush is like the coolest thing ever. I just love, you know, being able to sculpt model instead of dealing with polys. But yeah, so those are the softwares that I use. And then you asked programming language wise. When I was in software security, I was working mostly in Java, C++, and a little bit of C#. And then at the design agency, it was Python.
Got it. Yeah, thank you for sharing. What you know, as an artist, like what inspires you, or who inspires you? Are you inspired by particular artists in the industry or more traditional artists? Just as a curiosity of my own.
Yeah. Well, as far as for artistry and stuff, I actually am generally usually pretty inspired by foreign films and independent films. Like, I just really like indie films because most of the time they are interesting character studies. And yeah, I mean, that's what drives me to enjoy creativity, because I'm more of a visual storyteller anyways. So if it's character study, the imagery is all about telling that character's disposition through, you know, the environment or whatever. I wish I was a writer, but I'm not. So yeah, I mean, so DPs, for example, like Roger Deakins, I mean, he's, you know, kind of like the god DP, as far as like all the movies he's done. Coen brothers are always great. I love their movies. Fincher, and then there's other people like more independent filmmakers like Jeremy Saulnier, who did Blue Ruin, and I think he directed one of the seasons of True Detective. So he's kind of like making his way into the mainstream. Lynn Ramsey is another director that I love. And again, like, you know, stuff like Lynn Ramsey, she does like character study type films, but they're very, very cinematic. Yeah. So I would say that those are the types of films and people that inspire me.
Yeah, that's a wonderful range of references there. Nathan was kind of wondering, you know, is there anything about your job that you really don't like or that you don't appreciate?
Well, I would say the hard thing for me is that there are a lot of personalities. I would say the hard thing is the personalities and balancing the communication. Because at the end of the day, for me, I know, again, it kind of boils back down to like me, I can deal with stuff that I'm in control with, but when it has to do with like a big team of people, you know, there's always elements that are out of your control. And it's not because I'm a control freak, it's more like I'll go into a prep meeting, I'll describe what we need to shoot and how we need to shoot it. I swear to God, as clearly as I possibly can. And if there's 15 people in the room, I'm telling you right now, there will be 14 misinterpretations. And it's sort of just like, wow, okay, I guess I didn't explain that as clearly as I could, or, you know, so this is something that I'm still also learning to figure out, is how to communicate in a way that like everybody's going to get. It's almost kind of like you have to be a little bit of a mind reader, and I'm working on being a mind reader. So that's the part that I don't like yet, because I'm not very good at it.
That's always a bit tricky, but yes,
yeah,
that's definitely a skill that would certainly benefit us in this industry.
Yeah.
Danielle was wondering, you know, what are some of the biggest problems you've encountered within your role, whether it was on set or, you know, on the box as an artist? You know, what are some of the biggest problems that you might have come across, and how did you work through them?
Gosh. Well, I mean, I would say that the biggest problems, I mean, there's always technical problems, but I feel that technical problems can always be solved. Really, the biggest problems that we encounter are people problems, and it's usually to do with client expectations, somebody not being able to set those expectations, or say no, or, you know, find a nice way to say, we can't really do that, and then we get kind of sucked into a nightmare that everybody's got to be up until 4 in the morning dealing with. So, you know, though that's always not great, and it happens once in a while.
Right. Isaiah's wondering, you know, what was the most difficult project that you worked on? Has there been a project that you know, perhaps was more difficult to work on, but you sort of worked through it in a way that you found maybe?
Honestly, there's so many. Quantico was really difficult. Manifest was really difficult. Wu-Tang was really difficult. Actually, that was probably the most difficult job I had to deal with, and that all had to do with budgets.
Okay. So you said Wu-Tang was the most difficult project because of the budget?
Yeah, they just didn't. I just don't think that. Yeah, I mean, I just don't think that they were prepared for what it was going to cost to do a period piece. Because the thing is, it's from the 90s, right? Early 90s, late 80s. And I don't think anybody was really anticipating that there's been so many changes in the environment, you know, just LED store signs and bike paths and satellite dishes. You know, I don't think they were anticipating the amount of changes that would need to be made in the shots to make it appear like it's from the 90s. So yeah, I mean, there was some stuff there that was, you know, that was a difficult show to work on, for sure.
Right. And do you feel that you enjoy mostly working on the box more, or do you enjoy going on set more as a VFX supervisor? Do you have a preference for either?
I actually like doing both. When I'm on set, I also have a tendency to come back to the office and work on shots. I mean, I do really like both. I love being on set. Sometimes it can be really, really exhausting. I mean, sometimes you're out there in the freezing cold for 17 hours. You're out in the middle of, you know, the woods in Staten Island or something. You know, and it's just difficult, and that can be really hard. And then, you know, other times it's really fun. I mean, like, you know, on Manifest one day, like they had built a pirate ship for this bottle episode that they had. They built a pirate ship and put it on a blue screen. That was like my favorite thing ever. It's like, you know, I get to come to work and play pretend in this, you know, in these really cool sets that they build. So, I mean, I definitely love that. And then on the box, there's hardships there and good things as well. I definitely like, sometimes I just need a break from, like, you know, being on all the time, and being on the box allows me to just kind of like immerse myself back in the art, which I love doing. But at the same time, you know, on the box you have difficulties too. I mean, there's always going to be revisions. There's always going to be miscommunications or misunderstandings. And so, you know, you have to kind of just, you have to work through that.
Right. Tigiri Danke was asking a really great question, because I kind of interrupted you slightly when you were talking about your career. How did you become a supervisor? How did you get that gig?
Oh yeah, so it's kind of goes back to that Making of the Mob show, the first matte painting that is on my reel. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I bounced around to a bunch of studios, commercial studios, for a few years. And then I think the New York tax credits kicked in, they must have kicked in like 5 or 6 years ago, because that's when a lot of TV studios started popping up and, you know, hiring people for longer periods of time. And my teacher from NYU, Michael Hosenfeld, he happened to be a VFX supervisor at this company called Stephen David. And he, again, like I said, he knew that I wanted to be a VFX soup eventually. And so he brought me on to help him go on set and also just do a bunch of matte paintings and stuff. So that was my first experience being on set. And I was just sort of, I didn't really have a title. It wasn't like I was assistant VFX soup. I was just like, you know, extra hand, just hanging out, carrying a camera. But yeah, he taught me everything about, you know, all the data I needed to take, all the data wrangling. And then, you know, he quit, and they had me go on set for a show the following year. It was short, you know, they're just docudramas, so it was just a couple weeks worth of shooting. So they had me go on set the following year. You know, we did some cool stuff, some LED screen stuff. And again, I wasn't officially a VFX soup by any means, just, you know, it was just my second gig really ever being on set. And then they had me also supervise some stuff in-house. And then I moved on to a company called Zoic, where I met, I had a really great mentor, John Kilshaw. He also, again, I told him, I actually told Zoic that at the time I had a little bit of leverage because the other company was booking me often. And I told them that, you know, I'm going with this company because they keep putting me on set and I want to be a VFX soup. So they actually listened, and when they hired me, they booked me for like 8 months or something like that. They said, you know, we know that that's something that you want to do. So they put me on some like facial capture, like motion capture thing for a little bit. And then John Kilshaw, who ended up becoming my mentor, he knew that that's something I wanted to do. And he's a prolific VFX supervisor. And so he put me on Defenders, on Marvel's Defenders with him. And I would say that that was my first like big show. That was the first big show that I'd been on set for almost the full 6 months. He was obviously still the VFX supervisor. I was like the on-set supervisor. And so after Defenders, then it started to be like, okay, well, you know, Zoic's a big company, so they had 3 offices, one in LA, one in Vancouver, one in New York. And so between all those offices, there's always some show going on somewhere. And most of the time for all the East Coast stuff, they would end up just sending me. You know, whether or not I was the official supervisor or just the on-set person. So that's kind of how I built that repertoire. And I was there for 3.5 years. I was there for almost 4 years. You know, and in between, jobs, in between on-set jobs, I would, go on the box as a matte painter or CG artist or whatever. But yeah, that's kind of how I made my way into that.
Yeah, you highlight such a really important value, which is, to find a mentor in the industry to help support your career.
Yeah.
That's pretty much how you often will grow.
Yeah, I mean, you can't do it alone. Like you can't will it into existence. Like you just have to kind of you have to be in a situation where you can have these mentors. And so, stuff like, TAP is really great, I think, for people, just to kind of have that support. And then you also need to be vocal about what you want. It's also hard if you don't know exactly what you want. That's also a little difficult. So I think try and figure out what you enjoy doing, and then see if you can kind of assign, actual roles to that. If there are roles that line up with what you want to do, and then vocalize it.
Right.
Talk to your mentors. Maybe they can help you figure it out.
Yeah, that's very well said. We only have a few more minutes, so I kind of wanted to ask you, Alejandrina actually brought this up, which I think is a really important question, especially as you're our special guest today, or among our special guests today. Are there any challenges that you faced as a woman in the industry?
Oh, tons. I usually, don't verbalize it very often, but tons. I look young. I'm 38, but everybody thinks I just graduated college. And so that is part of it as well. But yeah, when I go on set and, they're literally like, much of the time the reaction has been is like, who is this person? Like, who are you assisting? Who are you assistant to or whatever? Yeah, tons. And it happens in the office too. I mean, it's nothing that's like, I can't say that I've gotten anything that's like horribly outright. Actually, no, some people have been horribly offensive. Somebody actually asked me if I dated somebody to get into VFX supervision. I'm like,
oh, wow.
No, that's not how that works. You actually have to be good at what you do. But yeah, I mean, most of the time, it's just really what it is often is that people have, these sort of like internal assumptions, and it's not necessarily conscious. It's not necessarily their fault. But it can be a little bit frustrating for sure, but you just kind of have to work through that, work past it, and just prove yourself. I mean, it's like, what else can I do? I just got to do the work and be good at it.
I appreciate your sharing and being so transparent about this, because it is something I see with a lot of my fellow friends who are VFX supervisors on set and fellow females.
Yeah.
I'm happy to report that I'm seeing more of a presence of female talent.
Yes. Yeah, and so I think that if there's more of us out there, then it starts to dispel the notion that we're not as capable, or that we got there by some other means.
Oh, yeah. My very, very last question for you is such that you have a very unique situation being at the Molecule, and Sammy was wondering, is the majority of your work remote, or are you in the office with others? And I'm conscious that the Molecule went through a transition, during this time.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically right now, nothing is shooting right now. I think there are some projects that are planning to shoot, or they're trying to shoot starting in September. But if anything's shooting right now, I don't know about it. So right now, we're all remote. Every company that I know is fully remote because we can be. We don't really have an excuse not to be honest. So yeah, the majority of the work that I'm doing right now, and I'm not doing any on-set work, so I'm doing a little bit of everything because it's a pandemic, and what else can we do? It's like we just kind of doing a little bit of like graphic design, a little bit of PR, a little bit of bidding here and there because random clients will come through with work pre-COVID. We're talking about animation stuff. I've been doing some panels and working with people from a company called Silver Spoon, who they have built LED screens, and we're working with them, and doing some Unreal work. So it's like we're kind of all over the place, you know, just sort of like, and I'm also working on shots. I'm like still doing work for actual shows. So it's a little bit of everything right now. It just has to be.
Right. And no day is the same, really. So
no day is the same.
Well, listen, Tehmina, I'm afraid that we have to wrap up, unfortunately, just because we have so much exciting programming today. And
totally.
We're conscious of how busy you are and how amazing it was for us to be able to share this space with you. So thank you so much for sharing your wonderful insight and for being here.
No problem. Thank you.